Good evening and welcome to CYC News for today, the 1st of February 2015 and the 24th of October 17:31am. I'm Susie Michael.
And I'm Daniel Noor. In today's headlines, His Holiness Pope Tawadros offers condolences for the departure of the Saudi King Abdullah. The Egyptian President Abdel Fattah Al-Sisi calls for the resumption of religious dialogue between Christian Churches and Al-Azhar. The ECHR condemns the international community's silence on the kidnapping of Christians in Libya. IS's spokesman calls for intensifying attacks against Christians. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbot visits St Mark's Coptic Church in Sydney, and celebrations as Australia's Socceroos win the Asian Cup of Football on home soil.
In our main story, His Holiness Pope Tawadros II, Pope of Alexandria and Patriarch of the See of St Mark, offered his condolences for the departure of the Saudi king, saying, "On my behalf and on behalf of the Coptic Orthodox Church, we offer the condolences to the people of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the departure of the Arab and Islamic symbol, Sage of the Arabs, and the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah ibn Abdul Aziz." His Holiness also added, "History will show the unforgettable leadership of the late king, both at the level of the Arab and Islamic nations. We ask God to grant the King Salman bin Abdul Aziz good luck to lead the Saudi kingdom and people to safety and goodness." His Holiness Pope Tawadros also sent delegation that consisted of His Grace Bishop Marcos, Bishop of Shobra El Khaima, Father Amin Yadli, Diocese Representative, Father Bolos Halim, spokesman of the Coptic Orthodox Church, and two other fathers, to the Saudi Arabia Embassy in Cairo in order to offer condolences for the Saudi king's departure.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah Al-Sisi sent a letter to His Holiness Patriarch Gregory of Antioch and all the East, of Alexandria and of Jerusalem, for the Melkite Greek Catholic Church, in which he stressed the necessity of resuming religious dialogue between Christian churches and Al-Azhar. According to a post published by Father Rafiq Greich on Thursday, the President said that killings and terrorist attacks committed by extremist groups in the name of religion in the Arab region are the worst violations of the teachings of Islam. His Excellency added that he called on Muslim religious men to renew elements of the religious discourse. He pointed to the meeting with Catholic Pope Francis I last November, in which they stressed the necessity of resuming religious dialogue between the Vatican and Al-Azhar to promote tolerance between nations, to root values of acceptance of others, and to support efforts to confront extremist thoughts. El-Sisi stressed necessity of peaceful solutions to all crises in the Arab region and active cooperation in eliminating terrorist organizations and groups which justify their actions and attract elements from within and outside the region. Patriarch Gregory sent a letter to President El-Sisi on January the 3rd, in which he praised efforts made by the President to cooperate with followers of different religions, including Jews and Christians. The Patriarch also stressed the necessity of dialogue, which he said became urgent due to bad conditions. The Patriarch also said that dialogue based on openness and love is the best to eliminate the religious fundamentalism threatening believers of all religions.
A young Coptic Christian, Boutros Yaqub Shahata, aged 18, was kidnapped by unknown men 3 days ago from a village in Malawi, Elminia. He was returned on Wednesday after the family paid a ransom of 25,000 Egyptian pounds to the kidnappers, following intensive negotiations to reduce the amount from £1 million. Human rights activist Sharif Nadi has said, "The village witnessed several months ago a similar kidnapping. Most of the 20 families that live in this area are ordinary villagers." He added that Copts in Malawi face fierce attacks by unknown organised groups. 2 wood stores owned by Copts were burned, and this crime of kidnapping a victim from inside his home in front of security guards charged with protecting the Church of St. Damiana in the village. He emphasised that the planners of these crimes deliberately do them in Samalot and Malawi, in Elminia province, because most of these 2 villages are Copts. Repeated attempts put pressure on the state by committing numerous crimes against Copts, and most of them are kidnappings. The perpetrators are never named by authorities.
Also in Elminia, Hala, wife of another Coptic Christian, Imad Magdi Adli, who was kidnapped in Libya 2 years ago, has said that her husband is a young man who left his modest house in a village in Samalut due to poverty. He said he left his family, being his wife, their 2 children and his elderly mother, and disappeared suddenly. They have not learned anything about him since August 14, 2012. Hala told MCN that her husband was working as a gardener in Benghazi, Libya, and that before travelling to Libya, he worked as a hired farm labourer in his village. She called on officials in Egypt to disclose his location and to tell them what happened. She asks, was he killed or detained? Adding, he left 2 children and I have no supporters in life except his brothers. I and my mother-in-law are the only ones left to take care of the children. Imad's mother, Mariam Zakaria, said her son was kidnapped in Benghazi 2 years ago and his brothers, who were also working in Libya, searched for him for 7 months but did not find him. She added that some persons told them he was detained by Ansar al-Sharia and others told them he was arrested under the pretext of preaching, although he is illiterate. Nazi, Imad's cousin, and Imad himself were arrested on charges of preaching. He said he had called on the Egyptian ambassador in Libya and the ambassador said he could not do anything for them. He added that Imad left his country and sons due to poverty and bad economic conditions.
A delegation from the Catholic Diocese in Luxor has met with the Governor of Quina to present a file on the Mar Gerges Church in Hegiza, which was demolished in an attack and has had its reconstruction backloaded by local villagers. The delegation consisted of His Grace Catholic Bishop Ioannis, Father Kamal Labib, the head of the Franciscan monarchism, Father Samah, priest of the Catholic Church in Quina, Father Elias Skanda and Sister Veronica, the director of the Franciscan school in Quina. Father Daniel, a priest from the Hegaza Church, said that the delegation presented a complete file with pictures and documents about the church since its construction was stopped in 1993. Bishop Ioannis explained in detail the history of the church since its building. He said that he explained all communications with the relevant authorities and showed them a picture of the ancient church before its demolition. Father Daniel added they discussed that the administrative court's decision to complete the construction of the church in 2005 was not carried out for security reasons. He continued, the governor promised to give attention to this matter and met the villagers to discuss the matter. Father Daniel explained that Copts celebrated Christmas Mass in the church, which was still under construction after the works were stopped. The tents in the schoolyard next to the church were burned on January 7.
The Egyptian Centre for Human Rights, the ECHR, condemned the silence of the international community and international human rights organisations about the kidnapping of 27 Egyptian Christians in Libya and the Islamic State's group's threat to execute them for their religious identity. The centre also denounced IS's threat of kidnapping and killing more Christians amid silence on these brutal, inhumane crimes. In a statement on Wednesday, ECHR, said there is unjustified silence on the targeting and killing of Egyptian Christians in Libya for their religious identity, while international human rights organisations released statements denouncing and strongly criticising the Egyptian regime in favour of the Muslim Brotherhood and other extremist movements in Egypt and the Arab world, which is unacceptable politicisation. Whenever convictions are delivered against crimes committed by these groups, and whenever the Egyptian authorities take decisions to curb their violence in the community, these international organisations immediately condemn the Egyptian authorities, ignoring what is happening in Libya and the targeting of Christians under the nose of the international community. ECHR added these statements. The Egyptian Centre for Human Rights blamed the Egyptian government and the international community for what may happen to the Egyptian Christians kidnapped in Libya earlier this month, just days after the killing of a Christian doctor, his wife and his daughter. No action has been taken against these recent incidents, and the members of these extremist groups and armed militias have not been prosecuted. ECHR reiterated its demand to the Egyptian government to deal seriously and firmly with the kidnapped Christians crisis and not to ignore their suffering.
And over to Mosul in northern Iraq, where Islamic State fighters have burnt down one of Mosul's oldest churches in the neighbourhood of Wada. The Armenian church was regularly used for worship. An official spokesman has said Islamic State fighters systematically destroy homes and places of worship on a daily basis.
Still in Iraq, where Abu Muhammad al-Adnani, a spokesman for the Islamic State in Iraq, has called for intensifying attacks against Christians, or crusaders in the infidel West, as he put it. In a recorded speech on Monday, he said, "We renew our calls for monotheists in Europe, in Western countries and everywhere, to attack Christians in their own homes, wherever they are." Adnani said, "You have seen what one Muslim did in Canada and what our brothers did in France, Australia and Belgium. We have seen Crusaders' armies mobilise in Australia, Canada, France, Belgium and other Christian strongholds. We consider them in a constant state of alert, terror, fear and insecurity, and the next will hopefully be worse," he added.
Chaldean Patriarch Louis Seiko of Babylon has said that the biggest threat is not the Islamic State's terrorism, but the theorists and advocates of Takfiri ideology, assessing that some of the rivals for the power, through religion, are the biggest threat. The Patriarch called on Muslims to take the initiative to overcome sectarian tensions and adopt a joint strategy to dismantle this ideology. In his speech on behalf of Father Moyesa al-Mokhalisi at a conference organised by the Iraqi Centre for Management of Diversity on Monday, the Patriarch said that religious and national components in Iraq are not communities from outer space. He stressed that these components, which are seen as minorities, were once the majority and have contributed greatly to the building of Iraq's history, but today they are marginalised. Patriarch Seiko appealed to Muslims to take the lead to overcome sectarian tension and develop a strategy to defeat the radical ideology. The Patriarch suggested a fixed principle to renounce discord among religious and sects and emphasise the principle of respect for others' freedom of belief and their right to practice their religion under the rule of law. Patriarch Seiko called for building and consolidating intellectual, cultural and religious civilization that accepts others and takes the responsibility for revision of educational texts of religion and history. He urged proper interpretation of religious texts and moderate discourse that urges human, patriotic and spiritual solidarity among all people.
The Coptic Orthodox Church in Australia has witnessed yet another historical event. The Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Mr Tony Abbot, and his wife, Mrs Margaret Abbot, visited St Mark's Coptic Orthodox Church in Arncliffe. Among the esteemed guests were Deputy Police Commissioner Mr Nick Caldas, federal ministers, state ministers and local parliamentary members. The Prime Minister's visit comes as a make-good on his election promise to the Coptic people when he was the opposition leader in 2012, namely that if elected as Prime Minister, he would come back and visit the Coptic Orthodox Church. As stated in his speech, Coptic people came to Australia by choice. They are hard workers that contribute to this great nation, and Mr Abbott salutes the Coptic people for their continuous involvement with the Australian community, whether as doctors, lawyers, pharmacists or other professionals that serve the great nation of Australia.
Under the supervision of His Grace Bishop Suriel, the Bishop of Melbourne Diocese, the diocese held a celebration on the occasion of the Silver Jubilee for the Coptic Youth Conferences that are being held yearly. It was begun by the late Pope Shenouda III in 1989. Currently, His Grace Bishop Musa, the General Bishop, participates in it.
And finally, in sport, a James Troisi goal in extra time gave Australia a 2-1 victory over South Korea and their first Asian Cup success after a thrilling final in Sydney. A sharp turn and 23-metre shot from Massimo Luongo put the hosts in front shortly before half-time. Son Heung-min grabbed a dramatic stoppage time equaliser after a clever flick from captain Ki Sung-young, but Troisi struck just before the end of the first period of extra time after good work from substitute Tommy Jurek. Despite their excellent record of qualifying for World Cups, South Korea are still waiting for their first Asian Cup title since 1960.
And that's all for CYC News. Stay tuned for more Christian content on CYC. From the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia, I'm Susie Michael.
And I'm Daniel Noor. Good night and God bless.